There is a 1968 Dodge Charger sitting in a garage in Phoenix, Arizona. It has not moved in 9 years. The tires are flat. The engine is cold. Dust covers every surface like a thin gray blanket. But every Sunday afternoon, a 73-year-old man named Daniel walks out there, pulls up a lawn chair, and just sits with it. His son thinks the car should be sold. His daughter offered him $35,000 for it last Christmas. Daniel said no without even thinking about it. Nobody in his family understands why. But the answer is not stubbornness. It is not simple nostalgia. Something much deeper is happening inside that garage. Something that started forming long before Daniel ever bought that car. To understand it, you have to go back to a very specific moment in American history. Not Daniel's history, the country's history. The year is 1955. America is exploding with energy. Factories that built tanks during the war are now building Chevrolets. Soldiers came home. They married. They moved to suburbs. And they needed cars to navigate this wide, spread-out, brand-new version of American life. For the first time in a generation, the future felt like something you could actually drive toward. The open road was not a metaphor. It was Route 66. It was a V8 engine and a highway that disappeared into the horizon. The children born in the late 1940s and early 1950s absorbed all of this before they could even name it. They watched their fathers wash cars on Saturday mornings the way other men went to church. The car was not transportation. It was physical proof that the family had made it. A clean driveway with a new model parked in it meant safety. It meant stability. It meant progress. Children do not analyze these signals. They absorb them into their nervous systems as foundational truths about what security looks like. By the time those children turned 16, the car had already been encoded in their brains as something far more than a vehicle. Then came the muscle car era. Between 1964 and 1972, American automakers built some of the most psychologically powerful machines in history. The Ford Mustang launched in April of 1964 and sold 22,000 units on its first day. Not because it was practical, because it made 22-year-olds feel like they were something. The Dodge Charger, the Plymouth Barracuda, the Chevrolet Camaro. These were not just products. They were identity in metal form. A young man in 1968 who bought a Charger was not buying transportation. He was buying a version of himself. This is where the psychological knot gets tied. Tight and permanent. Researchers who study autobiographical memory have identified something called the reminiscence bump. Emotional memories formed between the ages of 15 and 25 are retained with unusual clarity and unusual intensity. During those years, the brain is building identity. Everything experienced in that window gets coded not just as a memory, but as a self-defining event. The first car. The first drive alone at night. Saturday cruises with the windows down. These do not get stored as pleasant footnotes. They get stored as the template for who a person believes they fundamentally are. This is exactly what Daniel's family is missing. When his son looks at that Charger, he sees a depreciating asset taking up space. Daniel's nervous system sees the summer he was 20 years old. Alive in a way he has not felt since. Windows down. Engine loud. Everything ahead. But the story does not stay personal. It gets amplified by the culture around it. In 1968, Steve McQueen drove a Ford Mustang GT 390 through the streets of San Francisco in a film called Bullitt. The chase scene lasted 10 minutes and 40 seconds. It redefined what a car could mean. McQueen was not just a character. He was a type of man. Quiet. Competent. Unafraid. And the car was inseparable from who he was. Millions of young men watched that scene and did not just admire it. They internalized it. The car became a symbol of a specific kind of self-possession that the entire culture was celebrating. In 1969, Dodge sold the Charger using the same energy. Raw power. Minimal words. The car is a statement that required no explanation. Then everything collapsed. The 1973 oil crisis arrived and rewrote the relationship between Americans and their cars almost overnight. Gas lines stretched for blocks. Speed limits were lowered. The muscle car era ended with almost no warning. By 1975, powerful engines had been strangled by emissions regulations. Horsepower numbers collapsed. The cars got smaller, slower, less dramatic, and the young men who had built their identities around power and motion suddenly found themselves driving beige sedans that apologized for existing. This is the psychological rupture that almost nobody talks about. When a core identity symbol is suddenly removed, not gradually and not by choice but by external force, the mind does not simply update. It freezes a part of itself in the moment before the loss. Psychologists who study object attachment have observed that people form the most intense bonds with items connected to periods of interrupted identity. The thing you had to give up becomes more meaningful than the thing you kept. For boomers who lived through the muscle car era and watched it disappear, the classic cars that survived became artifacts of an interrupted self. Owning one is not about living in the past. It is about maintaining access to a version of yourself the world stopped making room for. This is why offers of money almost never work. Daniel is not holding onto a $35,000 asset. He is holding onto a self-concept that has no replacement on Earth. The cultural reinforcement kept coming long after the original era ended. In 1977, Smokey and the Bandit put a black Pontiac Trans Am on screen and made it the most exciting thing in American popular culture that entire summer. In 1984, Miami Vice told a generation that what you drove was who you were. Video games like Need for Speed and Gran Turismo let younger players simulate exactly the freedom those original drivers had felt on real roads. The car as identity object got reinforced from every direction, decade after decade, long after the muscle cars themselves were gone. By the time boomers reached retirement age, the classic car was no longer just a memory. It was the most durable symbol of self-determination they had left. Here is what most people fundamentally get wrong about this behavior. They frame it as an old man refusing to let go. They diagnose it as fear of change, irrationality, simple stubbornness. They see an obvious solution. Sell it. Move on. But the behavior is actually a form of psychological self-preservation that makes complete internal sense. When the structure of a working life disappears at retirement, when the body begins to feel less reliable, when the culture stops reflecting you back to yourself, the brain searches for stable anchors of identity. The classic car is one of the most powerful anchors available to this generation. It connects directly to the reminiscence bump years. Those formative memories stored with unusual depth and clarity. Letting go of the car does not just mean losing an object. It means consenting to the erasure of a self. Daniel's son stands in the driveway and sees a flat, tired relic. Daniel's nervous system sees the only physical object left in the world that still confirms the version of himself he actually recognizes. His career ended. His physical strength faded. The cultural era that shaped him moved into history books. One by one, the external confirmations of who he was disappeared. The Charger stayed. What looks like an old man refusing to sell a car is actually something far more precise. A person using every psychological resource available to maintain continuity of self in a world that has largely stopped offering it. The real question was never why Daniel will not let go of the car. The real question is what it says about everyone else that they assumed he should. If this video gave you food for thought, please show your support with a like and share in the comments which story truly resonated with you. Subscribe to the channel. I'm already preparing a host of new and transformative insights for you that will help you better understand yourself. Thank you for being here with me, and I'll see you in the next episode.